This is episode 65 of the Christian Research Journal Reads podcast, Space Pirates and Treasure Planets, a review of Star Wars Skeleton Crew by Cole Burgett. This article was an online exclusive published January 29, 2025, and is in the Christian Research Journal, Volume 48, Number 1, 2025. It appears in our Cultural Apologetics column. The Christian Research Journal Reads podcast presents audio versions of Christian Research Journal articles. To read the full review as well as its documentation, please go to equip.org. That's EQUIP.org.
Space Pirates and Treasure Planets, a review of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. This article is by Cole Burgett and is read by an automated voice. The galaxy far, far away is no stranger to wonder. Ever since George Lucas first took audiences on an adventure through its space lanes back in 1977, it has continued to capture the hearts and imaginations of untold legions of fans. Star Wars Skeleton Crew is the latest installment in this beloved franchise, rekindling that old-fashioned sense of awe with its tale of a group of children who become lost in the vastness of space. Skeleton Crew could hardly be accused of prioritizing spectacle over soul, taking Star Wars back to its roots, in a way, balancing the thrilling, swashbuckling escapades with moments of quiet and thoughtful introspection. Too often, I suspect, fans forget that the original Star Wars, 1977, opens with a frantic space battle before launching its point-of-view characters to a desert planet with sweeping vistas where they putter around for an inordinate amount of time before we ever finally get to our main character. There is a kind of leisurely quality to the pacing. What actually happens in that window of time before they meet Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill? Nothing that needs to be shown. Yet it plays like Lucas is having fun, perfectly content to break the rules of pacing and movie-making in the name of creating an alien, but somehow strangely familiar, landscape. Skeleton Crew consciously leans in the same direction with its story of space pirates and treasure planets that nevertheless feels familiar to us. Like that old copy of Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island sitting on a bookshelf that one seldom cracks open but finds that, when they do, they are transported back to a simpler time and place that still somehow manages to reboot their sense of morality and longing for something greater. 4 kids on a starship. What sets Skeleton Crew apart from the rest of the pack of live-action Star Wars series is the way it taps into a childlike perspective on the galaxy, retaining the mythic gravitas of Lucas's original vision, while nonetheless offering a different lens on the goings-on in that 3-decade span between Return of the Jedi, 1983, and The Force Awakens, 2015. Nostalgic without slipping over into sentimentality, the show is a nod to both classic adventure stories, like Treasure Island, and coming-of-age tales like those made popular by Amblin Entertainment. The action kicks off when 4 young adventurers from the planet at Aten stumble upon a strange finding on their planet. The primary point-of-view character is Wem, Ravikubit Conyers, a boy who lives with his father, Wendell Tunde Adebimpe, and is captivated by the lore of Jedi. It's his fascination with the mysteries of the galaxy and thirst for adventure that leads to the group's initial discovery. His counterpoint is Fern Ryan Kiera Armstrong, a headstrong and somewhat mischievous girl who emerges as the group's natural leader. She is the daughter of Farah Carrie Condon, an undersecretary on Aten. Kekvi Kariana Crater is Fern's tech-savvy and resourceful best friend, and Neil, Robert Timothy Smith, is a rule-abiding Ortolan who runs around with whim. These 4 distinct personalities round out the core cast of children. The discovery on Aten turns out to be a long-buried starship, the Onyx Cinder, that the kids inadvertently launch into space while still aboard. Accompanying them is SM-33, voiced by Nick Frost, a decrepit droid found on the ship with a cranky demeanor, battered chassis, and patchy memory. He remains loyal to whoever holds the title of the ship's captain, one of the show's running gags, and his interactions with the children are a source of comic relief. But things take an unexpected turn when the kids venture to an outpost, only to encounter the fearsome Shistavinan pirate captain, Brutus, Fred Tatasciore, and Stephen Oyam. He throws them in the brig, where they meet an unexpected ally in the form of Jod Nawwood, Jude Law, an enigmatic character who is revealed early on to be Force-sensitive, leading Wim and the others to assume he is a heroic Jedi. Stevenson does Star Wars, The children quickly learn, however, that Jod is anything but a hero. In fact, by the time the credits roll, we're not even sure that Jod is his real name. We learn of multiple aliases he has operated under, including Crimson Jack, Dash Zentin, Professor Umain Gorlox, Jodwick Sank, and the Mad Captain Silvo. In a glowing review of the series, Jack Seal, writing for The Guardian, rightfully characterizes Jod as too irresistible to be a proper villain and too dodgy to be a trusted friend. Much like Long John Silver in Stevenson's Treasure Island, Jod is presented as morally ambiguous, walking the fine line between mentor and manipulator. Both characters are as charismatic as they are wily and cunning. Jod, like Silver, has a remarkable ability to charm almost everyone he meets. Nevertheless, there remains an underlying sense of menace and danger about him. His initial role as a guide for the children mirrors Silver's mentorship of Jim Hawkins, and both characters impart essential knowledge and skills that help the protagonist survive. However, Jod, also like Silver, harbors his own agenda, and his shifting loyalties keep the children, and the audience, skeptical about his true intentions. This duplicity makes Jod an undeniably compelling figure, especially when paired with that same magnetic pull that so defines Silver's character in Treasure Island. Similarly, SM-33 calls to mind characters like Ben Gunn, whose quirks and peculiarities add a dose of levity to the darker themes of Stevenson's novel. SM-33's loyalty to whoever holds the title of ship's captain highlights the hierarchical and rule-bound nature of pirate crews and their strict adherence to some kind of articles or code, which actually has its roots in historical accounts. Together, Jod and SM-33 embody that unique enchantment that comes with adventure and freedom, along with the underlying sense of danger and treachery that makes Stevenson's 1883 novel an enduring genre classic. Seeing things clearly, one of the more important themes that runs throughout the show, and one of the most common themes in these types of coming-of-age stories, is the shedding of naivety. This particular theme carries a weighty significance, especially for Christians. Jesus instructed his disciples to be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. Matthew 10:16, NASB 1995. Maintaining moral clarity while confronting the realities of a broken world. A world that, as Jesus warns, will actively work against those who follow him. John 15:20. Yet too often, it is the case that Christians today fall into the trap of naivety, mistaking idealism for virtue or ignoring the harsh truths of life in favor of a sanitized perspective. It is this sentimentalism that calls for kindness without truth and defangs the Christian faith of any real bite it might otherwise have. Unfortunately, it is the standard operating procedure for many in the church today. Stories like Star Wars, Skeleton Crew, with its blend of wholesome adventure and clear-eyed take on the realities of growing up in a world that isn't always good or safe, offers some valuable inroads for the Christian apologist looking to interact with the culture at large. Jod, like so many iconic Star Wars characters, carries the scars of betrayal, loss, and, ultimately, moral compromise. His past, marked by the trauma of Order 66 and the untimely death of his Jedi mentor, further emphasizes the fragility of innocence. Our quartet of heroes are but degrees removed from life trajectories that mirror Jod's, whose journey from idealistic youth to pirate captain to master manipulator of others stresses the need for both self-awareness and the refinement of a strong moral compass to keep one, as it were, on the straight and narrow. Faith, like the children's trust in Jod, is initially quite vulnerable. A growing discernment on their part is a reflection of maturity and a refocusing of vision. A cultivation of the ability to understand the difference between innocence and naivety, between trust and gullibility, is a hallmark of spiritual maturity. Jod's backstory, whether fully true or strategically curated, reminds us that people often operate from a place of pain and self-preservation, and recognizing that truth does not diminish the call to love others, but tempers that empathy with wisdom and discernment. Throughout the course of the show, the children transition from wide-eyed idealists to resilient survivors who must contend with Jod's cynicism and find a way to balance hope with realism. Wisely, Skeleton Crew does not shy away from tragedy or the cost of growing up. The series does not even give Jod a definable redemption arc. Yet it does not revel in cynicism, and one gets the sense that when Wynn calls out to Jod in the last minutes of the final episode, it is an invitation to turn from the path that has led to his own downfall. Of course, he chooses to watch his little empire burn rather than join the children, but that does not invalidate the possibility that redemption could be his, if only he desired it. Jesus prayed for his disciples to be in the world, but kept from the workings of the evil one. John 17:14-16. Yet even Jesus knew that to be in the world meant to engage with broken, cynical people like Jod. The problem with sentimentality, or at least a sentimentalized view of hope in a fallen world, is that it is so often swallowed up by the very real tragedies human beings face every day. This is why the Christian's hope, which is an anchor for the soul, must itself be anchored to something even more powerful than tragedy and more enduring than pain. Hebrews 6:19-20. Star Wars Skeleton Crew is a worthwhile cultural artifact for the apologist to have on their shelf for having those kinds of conversations, with believers and non-believers alike. It portrays a galaxy where tragedy is real, but one in which neither cynicism or sentimentality is the final word. It's a children's story reminding even jaded adults that growing up involves learning to navigate brokenness with discernment. But many adults in the room will likely find a point of connection in the character of Jod, the beaten-up and bedraggled man who takes each day at a time in the name of just getting through. His story is a sobering reminder that a life defined by self-preservation and compromise ultimately leads to emptiness. Yet it is quite literally out of the mouths of babes that the door to redemption is left open for him, if only he were willing to step through it.
Thank you for listening to another episode from the Christian Research Journal Reads podcast, which provides audio articles of Christian Research Journal articles. If you go to equip.org, you will find a brand new article for the Christian Research Journal published weekly. In addition, please subscribe to our other podcasts. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts, you will find the Christian Research Journal Reads podcast, the Postmodern Realities podcast, which features interviews with Christian Research Journal authors, our flagship podcast, the Bible Answer Man broadcast, and the Hank Unplugged podcast, where CRI President Hank Hanegraaff takes you out of the studio and into his study to engage in in-depth, free-flowing, essential Christian conversations on critical issues with some of the most interesting and informative people on the planet. At equip.org, you will also find a lot of resources to equip you, including many thousands of Christian Research Journal articles. That's equip.org.